Hello, hi everyone, and welcome to the stream. So we're just going to get straight into it. And tonight I am joined by the amazing April Edwards. April, how are you?
Hey, Gregor, how are you?
Yeah, long time no speak. How are you? All good?
Busy as usual, but all good. I mean, new job, new everything.
How's the
So
new job? New
it's
everything? All
good.
good?
It's good. It's been what month is it? It's July. Four and
Is
a
it?
half months.
Yeah.
It'll be 5 months. 5 months in a couple
What
weeks.
is that? Time flies. Doesn't it feel
Yeah,
like 5 months?
doesn't. And I came in like day zero with a ton of content on day zero. So they were like, "Oh wow, videos, blogs, all of it." So it's moved really fast. It's moved really
Cool.
fast.
So tonight we're having an AMA, but in between that we'll be chatting about Copilot and GitHub Code. I can never say this. GitHub Codespaces. Something that I haven't really played about with, so I'm looking forward to the demos of that. But before we get into that, so the new job's going well. Enjoying it.
New job's going well.
Different
My
from the
manager
last
is
one?
actually in the same country as me for the first time ever in
Ah,
like
that's handy.
years. Chris Reddington, so he's down the road from me.
Nice.
Small team, so and it's actually really cool. I get to work with Martin Woodward, who used to be Microsoft.
Oh, nice.
So Christopher Harrison. He's also former Microsoft. So yeah, and we got lots of good people on here. I see Andrew and Mert here already.
Yeah.
So,
Hello to everyone.
yeah.
T-shirts like this, I like that. Yes, we've got the matching T-shirts. We'll talk about that later. Mine was on the floor. I have to admit, mine was on the floor, so it does need washed. But I thought I need to have it.
No one can smell you. No one can smell you.
Exactly.
I've been recording all day, and the trick to recording at home is I keep my shirt out on top of my dresser, so I don't like fold it or anything. And then I just put it on when I need to record because no one can smell me, and then I can have the T-shirt I want. So yeah, no smell-o-vision, which is cool, which is good.
Good. So you got your feet under the table at GitHub now, then? Yeah.
Still learning. Like I still don't know a lot of people, and it's still trying to find stuff. The problem every company has is like, how do I find this document or this thing, or where do I go for X, where do I go for Y? And I think the reality is too, we're growing massively. And that's why I took the role, because I wanted to grow. I wanted to do new things and build a team. I mean, we think about back to Abel Wang and Donovan Brown and Martin Woodward. They were all there in the early days of Microsoft advocacy. I call it the heyday, right? And we've got Damian Brady in Australia. So Damian was part of that growth as well. So it's pretty cool to build out a fairly new team. You're sitting there, you spend a lot of your time talking to people internally about what you do and how you do it. And that's a lot of my job. So speaking to customers, account teams don't even know we exist or how to use us. Product groups aren't sure how to use us just yet. So we're in that process. And then at the same time, we're still delivering content all over the globe. So it's pretty cool to be growing something and not come into a predetermined model where you're kind of stuck. So yeah, it's a nice change. Nice change.
What's your title there? So it says here you're senior developer advocate and DevOps practice lead. That's a mouthful.
It is. I was a senior enterprise advocate. Now I'm a senior developer advocate because we moved. I got reorged like 2 months into my role, which happens every time.
Is that the same sort of thing at Microsoft? They do it like every new financial year type thing?
Microsoft did it. I mean, I got reorged at Microsoft. I've lost count, probably almost twice a year. And we definitely had changes during the FY. Like we always do for everyone that's out there, Microsoft runs on a July 1st to June 30th FY financial year. GitHub does the exact same. So this is the time of year when we're planning. We're in FY planning like constantly. But then in 3 months, the FY changes or budgets get allocated. Something happens, the wind blows, and then we reorg or we change. And the change is fine. You just have to learn to be adaptable. But the reorgs happen usually before the FY change, sometimes at the FY. I would say the last few years, they've been happening randomly. So I got reorged when I joined Microsoft Advocacy 2 months into the role. I got moved out from Steven Morawski. The DevOps team disappeared. Then I moved to different manager. And then after that was like 8-9 months with that manager. I got reorged again. So it's not even on a yearly cycle now. So this reorg, so we were enterprise advocates. I'm literally doing the same job, just now a developer advocate. They just changed our title. They moved us under Martin Woodward, except we were under product before. So are we under product now? Pass. I don't know. There's an org chart that I haven't memorized. But yeah, we work with Martin Woodward and we line to products and everything. So
nice guy to work for.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, just quick hi to Mohammed and a hi to Carol. Nice to have you on. Thanks for coming on. So we're doing a bit of an AMA. So if you guys have got any questions you want to ask April, now it is an AMA, so you can ask her absolutely anything. She might not reply, but
I might not reply, but yeah, ask me anything. We'll see what happens.
So how have you been using Copilot and Codespaces before you'd moved there? So you've got a bit of a background in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. For those that haven't really seen a lot of my content, I've been using GitHub as a integrated into Microsoft products for probably 4.5 years now. 4.5 years, probably. I was always integrating Azure pipelines into my GitHub repositories, deploying into Azure pipelines and Azure DevOps. I've had code in GitHub for a long time. I've been using GitHub for longer than that, but actually integrating the two has probably been about 4.5 years. It was something we showcased, but never really spoke about. Like I would do a demo, and I know, Gregor, you've seen them. Oh, I'll integrate into Azure pipelines. No big deal. Into my GitHub repository. And I think as GitHub's grown as a platform, we have a lot more features. So it's not just source control. It's not just a code repository. It's a platform. And actually, I do have some slides with me, and they're new slides. So I might actually show them off. They're really pretty and fancy. But yeah, I mean, I can go and talk about that. So yeah, I think that was a natural transition for me for doing all these things, integrating it. And because there was an acquisition between Microsoft and GitHub, it was a natural transition for me to go over and align to the GitHub products. It's been interesting because I'm very much an Azure person. So everything I do is in Azure, and like join GitHub, they're like, you need to be cloud agnostic. And I'm like, oh, okay.
I didn't know that.
I do have an AWS cert from like many moons ago when I was a solution architect many years ago. And I've worked in AWS, and I do talk about AWS and GCP in all my talks anyways. So it wasn't a huge change. And I have friends that work for Amazon and AWS, and they always used to give me a lot of crap about working at Microsoft. And now they're like, yeah, well, shut up now. I'm like, that's a good idea. So, yeah.
Well, I'm got a controversial question here, but what do you prefer? Do you prefer Azure DevOps, or do you prefer GitHub? Off the record, of course.
I think I see them a little bit differently. I think each have their use cases. So I love Azure DevOps as a tool. We could go into why the cool things. What I love about Azure DevOps was Azure boards. Pipelines. It's CI/CD. It had a lot of features and functionality in it, but boards were my thing. I loved using boards. The other thing I loved about Azure DevOps is just the way it feels, the way it looked, and I got used to it, the integration into a lot of things. Now, flipping that over to GitHub, we have GitHub projects, and we have some new features in beta that are awesome. It's not the same. So for me, I can't think of them as the same product. So when customers are like, do I go Azure DevOps or GitHub? The answer is always, it depends. What's your use case, right? So I think it really just depends what your use case is. So I use GitHub day in and day out. We build GitHub on GitHub. We deliver GitHub with GitHub. I think I have to think of something I might have done differently before. And I'm like, oh, how do I do this on GitHub? It's just different. And I went through this probably a year and a half ago. I was writing content for Microsoft Build using GitHub. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to use projects and do this thing. And I went, where do I find this thing that doesn't quite exist? So I think I see them as two different entities in my head still. And that's how I treat it when I speak to customers. So I do sometimes talk about Azure DevOps, but most of the time I'm sitting there talking to customers why GitHub is a platform.
Yeah, we've started using GitHub projects quite a lot. Well, for everything at work now. Well, pretty much everything, about 95%. To begin with, I was a bit like, oh, this feels like there's lots of things missing, but I'm starting to like it now. It's definitely getting there. And I think I know about some of the features you're talking about that are coming. They look really good. Yeah, they'll help.
Really good features coming. There's a lot of enterprise features coming. And there's a lot of stuff in there that Azure DevOps doesn't have, a lot of integrated things that when I was doing a lot with the Azure Static Web Apps team back in 2020, was that 2021? I don't know. Yes, the years are blending. I wrote the Azure DevOps and static web app content, and I remember writing it, and I was actually more of a DevOps focus. So I did ADO content and the GitHub content, and the GitHub content had a lot of Easter eggs built into the capability that Azure DevOps didn't have. And I'm like, oh, okay. So this wins over here because it was such a slicker feel, such a slicker look, and it automated things like out of the box that you didn't get with Azure DevOps. So I think there is a lot of money going into GitHub to make it a pretty awesome platform. And I just, I tell people to think of them in separate things.
Yeah. What have you played about with discussions on GitHub at all?
Yeah. So I put a tweet up about that recently. So I'm managing, we're calling them user groups, but they're not quite user groups. They're enterprise user groups. So focused on enterprise customers. And we do them by geographical region. I'm managing 4 regions all through EMEA. So, because I needed more to do in my time, managing more user groups is what I'm doing. And we've traditionally used discussions. And actually, we as a team, the account team, we're not getting a lot of interaction with people. So there is a way to enable that notification in discussions by using if you star repository, you then are notified when discussions happen. And it's great. It's awesome. I use it as like the water cooler or the talk about anything other than the stuff in the project stuff that's focused on your tasks.
Good idea.
So they're awesome. But I want to see more features come out to it. I'm pending time, spare time at this point in my life. I'm trying to get a blog out about discussions, but I'm also trying to leverage it in the user groups that I've built out, the community stuff, because it's a great way for people to talk and discuss, things. And there will be a post for me, I think the next few days. I'm just waiting on it for it to be ready. We have a community repo for people to give feedback on products that uses discussions. So I don't have the link, but it's a GitHub/community repo, I think is what it is. I think off the top of my head, I could look it up. But yeah, we're using discussions heavily in that. So I'm going to be putting up some posts about that coming soon, especially around GitHub Copilot chat, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit tonight.
Oh, nice. Because I've got access to that and I love it. Yeah, I was wondering, when is that coming out for everyone?
It's in public beta last Thursday, so it's been a week. It will come, but it's a lot more widely available. I think where the focus is, and this is, you and me are normal people, we're community people, but the enterprise focus is really where a lot of this is being requested from. So I don't know. It will be in the roadmap. That's the answer I can give.
I'm using it in the nightly build of Visual Studio. Is it out for Visual Studio Code? Did I read that somewhere? Yeah, I thought that. Okay,
I will actually show it to you in Codespaces tonight.
Ah, nice. I'm looking forward to that. So we've got some demos coming up, everyone. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Before we go into that, the last time I think we met in person, you were going scuba diving. Tell us all about your scuba diving.
So what trip was that? That was Scapa. Went up to Scapa Flow in up in the Orkneys.
Tell the people about Scapa, because a lot of people don't know about that. I didn't know about it until you told me.
Yeah, people, when I talk about scuba diving, there's like normal scuba diving and then there's UK scuba diving. Because when I moved to the UK 10.5 years ago, I'd been diving and I dove in a quarry called Stony Cove with a friend in what they call like a semi-dry. So it's a wetsuit, but you don't get entirely wet. And I froze my toes off. It was December. I was cold. I was miserable. And I'm like, yep, we're done with UK diving. Not interested. I want to go dive in other places. Well, when lockdown hit, I'd actually already invested in a dry suit. And when lockdown hit, we couldn't really leave the country. So I started diving a lot. And I took a course, what they call accelerated decompression. So mixed gases, tech diving, etc. Really deep stuff. So I was told about Scapa Flow probably 9-ish years ago. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's a bunch of wrecks, big deal. It's the World War I fleet that the Germans sunk. So the Germans scuttled all of their ships during World War I in Scapa. When they were defeated, they were told to sink everything. So everything sunk and everything went turtle. So all the hulls are upside down. Some are sideways. Some sit like this and others sit upside down. And these are big German warships and they have turrets and guns. So when you're diving, you have these turrets sitting out underwater that are just massive. So yeah, I saw you before that trip, and that was deep technical diving up in Scapa. And the Orkneys are beautiful. They're beautiful islands. Great wildlife. Shetland is also another great place. Couldn't live there personally, but amazing. Yeah. So there's actually, I bought a book from about someone who actually refloated the Navy ships, the German fleet. So the ships that are down there now have not been raised, but they raised a lot in like the 70s, and then they sold them all for scrap metal. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's why I started doing UK diving was the wrecks, and I had done wrecks before, but not these wrecks. And they are world renowned, and I didn't know they existed till like 9 years ago. And I was like, I'll do it one day, maybe. I was actually supposed to go up in May or April, in the month of April, but I just started my new job, so
couldn't do that.
Nope. But I will go up soon. So yeah, the Orkneys are beautiful. Scapa's amazing. It's, you got to take like a several hour ferry out of the top, like John O'Groats area.
Yeah.
Scrabster's the name of the town.
Okay, never heard of that. You know what about that, I do. Right, cool. So
I've driven all over this country, so
yeah, definitely. Right, so well, hang on, we've got a comment. Let's see if there's. Here we go. Mert's got a question for us. Oh, there's actually a couple of questions. So
I was going to go for the first one, but we can go with Mert.
Yeah, let's go for that one.
All right. What challenges may I face if I decide to migrate everything from Azure DevOps to GitHub? Well, it depends. Depends on how legacy your Azure DevOps system is. So are you using Azure DevOps host in the cloud? Are you using Azure DevOps server? There is a migration tool. It just depends what kind of stuff you've built into your not projects. What do we call them? Yeah, projects. Sorry, into your projects. Like, what have you built into your projects in Azure DevOps, and how you migrate them over? The biggest thing that you'll find is your YAML will need to be converted from all your pipelines, and then your boards and projects. All that will need to get converted, and that's the tough bit. Boards is where everything kind of, I don't want to say falls apart, but that's where we have it highly customized. So.
Yeah, no, good one. One of my pals, Sam Smith, he actually works for GitHub. He wrote a converter for DevOps YAML to GitHub, so I might try and find that link.
Yeah, it exists. It definitely exists. And that was a blog I was thinking about writing like a really long time ago. And I think I have these blogs in my backlog, as we always do. And it's not until I get customer requests or community requests that I'm like, oh, I have that blog in my backlog, in my back pocket. And I'll sit down, I'll write it in a few hours. But there are some great migration tools. They are a lot better as well. And I think we're very conscious of that, of people wanting to migrate over. So we're getting a lot of questions about that, especially in enterprise environments. But legacy stuff, especially with Azure DevOps Server, is the biggest pain point, what version you're on and all that. So yeah, boards is where it stinks, but you can get your code over. Absolutely. And you get your YAML files converted.
Yeah. Okay. So Andrew's got a question as well. Thanks for the question, Matt. So Andrew's got this question here.
So about changing career, coming from support or project teams to DevOps. So I'm going to talk about what I did in my career. I'm not always right, or really rarely ever right. But I've worked in tech for over 24 years. I've worked in support. I've worked on a help desk. I've worked off out of hours support. I've done it all, level 2, level 3, project implementations, etc. Project teams is probably the easiest because you're working in a cycle, hopefully. Most projects out there work in a waterfall cycle. So learning agile practices is really critical. I will say this day in and day out, the Unicorn Project is the #1 book to read for this. Just start there because it's fun. It's easy to read. It kind of helps you see that end goal of what you want to achieve. And even if you're on a support role, that's a really good thing to see. The thing that's tough with support is you're firefighting. You're literally a firefighter. You very rarely get to do proactive work. So you need to go. If you're in a support role, you absolutely need to start thinking about doing projects and getting involved in projects. And that's what I did. I worked at a company in the US called Thrive Network Services. We were owned by Staples. We were a fairly homegrown MSP at the time. And I worked on a help desk and I took tickets all day. But then because I was a level 2 engineer, as then I moved up, they're like, oh, we're going to assign you to projects. So I got to go on call and then go do projects. I literally did everything. And that was the way I built my best experience in terms of like how to deal with tech, how to learn tech, how to have all the war stories. And then for me, moving into DevOps happened when I started really working in the cloud. So I started moving into solution architecture, which also helped with the DevOps process, planning, designing, and implementing. And then it was very much a waterfall process and it was very painful. And there were tiers. There were a lot of tiers. I worked for other MSPs here in the UK in those days. And I was like, there has to be a better way. And I kept hitting all these head walls. So I had to make the career change to go into Azure. And then that's when I went into full project-led Azure stuff for another MSP. And then I joined Microsoft because I was like fully into Azure. But that was a different journey I was on. But I think that project management as much, but project team scenario is the best place to be. Because then when I was in engineering, again at Microsoft, doing code and doing cloud native deployments and build with code with customers, we were working in an agile mindset. So I lived and breathed the agile mentality. in a different role than I had been in before. So I've worn all these hats in my career. My career literally is this weird squiggly line of doom. And I still know what I'm going to do when I grow up. Like, I have no idea. I'm literally, I'm going with the flow. I love what I do. But yeah, I think DevOps is a learned thing, and you have to learn by being in kind of the trenches, especially on a support role. And a support role is fantastic. More people should work in support, because you have to learn to deal with people, and people are hard.
Yeah.
And when you go into projects, yeah.
Last 3 sprints, last 6 weeks, I've been doing support. I don't mind it, to be honest. I quite like getting back into helping customers and doing tickets and stuff like that. As long as you get the right result, it's not too bad. Yeah. So we've moved to DevOps Intercept since October last year, and that's quite interesting because, like, most people haven't really done the Scrum, Agile, and all that good stuff before, and it's quite interesting trying to explain it to them. It ends up being quite a lot of meetings and quite a lot of ceremonies, but yeah, I think it's pretty good going forward. Yeah, it just takes a little bit of getting used to.
It does, and that's what we did at engineering at Microsoft. So when I was at engineering at Microsoft, that was probably some of my best experience in DevOps because we had a time limit. So when I was in CSE, which is commercial software engineering, we would get introduced to a customer. We go into a design session, design out the project. We had a project manager that helped really lead the project along with the project owners, and then we had to go in and execute it. And we were empowered as engineers to control what our tasks were. We had a Scrum Master, Scrum Lead, whatever you want to call it. I called myself the Scrum Battle Lord because my manager called me the Windows Battle Lord one day because I could navigate the Windows and Microsoft ecosystem really well. I'm like, don't pigeonhole me into the Windows ecosystem. So he started calling me the Battle Lord. So I was the Scrum Battle Lord because you couldn't say Scrum Master anymore. So Scrum Lead, or we could pick our title. So I was Scrum Battle Lord. But it is a lot of ceremonies, but it's kind of death by fire. But yet it's good to get into the practice. And as we talk about AI shortly, we need humans, and we need humans to run the ceremonies. We need humans to run the projects. We need humans to support each other, and that's really critical. That's why we still need the humans there. So yeah, I would say, learn, get involved in projects, learn agile mentality, but read the Unicorn Project. It is the Unicorn Project, right? Why is my brain not working? This is what I get for a long day. Gene Kim's book. Yeah. It is the Unicorn Project, right?
Yes.
Okay. I sat on a panel with Gene Kim. If he ever sees this, he'll come back at me and be like, "You forgot my book."
Before we move on to like the demos and slides and stuff like that, let's talk about whiskey and bourbon, because I know you're a big fan of both. You've probably got a bottle sitting right next to you, don't you?
No.
Tell us about the bottle of bourbon you've got. What's this? So I can
even. Oh, here we go. It's actually whiskey.
That's good.
My camera does not want to focus on it.
No, I can see it. It's not too bad now. Yeah, but
okay. Yeah. This is what you get for using a fun lens. So it's a Yamazaki 12-year whiskey. This specific bottle was bought with Abel Wang. So this was just before he passed. It'll be 2 years ago Saturday, actually. So this sits in my cupboard. I don't drink it except for once a year, maybe twice a year. But it's a Japanese whiskey, and the Japanese do phenomenal liquors. Their whiskey's really good. I have Japanese vodka in my house. By the way, I'm not an alcoholic for anyone listening. And then I actually have a ton of Scottish whiskey, Gregor, from actually when I saw you on my return home. I actually, after I saw you the next day, I went to Dornoch. And while that has a famous golf course, which is your thing, there was a really good whiskey store. And I went, and the guy's like, try this. And I bought like 3 whiskeys. So Scottish whiskeys are good. I think they come in two remits for me, peaty and less peaty. I'm a less peaty kind of girl. So when I was up in Dornoch, most of the Scottish whiskeys I own are usually done in a rum cask. And I love rum. So that's kind of like...
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like rum, don't you? So do I.
Yeah, love rum. We've had conversations about this.
Yes.
And then I have a ton of bourbon. I have some really good bourbons. I don't have a ton of bourbon. I've some smaller bottles, and then I have a few favorites. And bourbon is like, for me, I tend to prefer that over whiskey, without question. So bourbon's made distilled in the US. It has to be distilled a certain way in a certain county, and there's lots of rules around it. But I'm a bourbon girl, so I always have a bottle of Makers, and then I have a few really nice. I have Blandford's, a couple bottles of Blandford's actually, which are impossible to get because the distillery burned down. So
Andrew's making a comment. Andrew's got a question, but he's also got a comment.
So I'm actually going to Costco tomorrow. I haven't seen a lot of stuff in. They have some, but for bourbons and you get some good stuff. I bought a bottle of tequila for my friend's birthday, and it was like the same price as it is in Tesco, but twice the size. So same price as the grocery store, but twice the size. And I got a really good bottle of like Patron for her birthday. So yeah. So we should probably answer some technical questions.
Yeah. Let's go back to the technical questions.
Learnings for GitHub. So GitHub has a load of documentation. We're really good at docs, which is great. How to do stuff, how to get started. That is really good. There's been a lot of actual requests from people to have like starting day zero from GitHub. So that's something that's in the making. I don't have dates on when that's going to come out. I am writing some content around that as well. I need more time in my life, but it's getting written. And then we do have learning paths on Microsoft Learn as well. So if you go to Microsoft Learn, we have GitHub learning paths. We have Git learning paths. We have all the learning paths on Microsoft Learn support all the GitHub stuff as well. So they're absolutely in both places. So I'd say GitHub Docs. There will be videos coming out. Subscribe to the GitHub YouTube channel. We have all sorts of stuff in there. And then, GitHub Docs, Microsoft Learn, YouTube. Those are probably your three.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump to this question as well. I think, Andrew, which parts of GitHub are you struggling with? Is it like the boards? Is it the repos, or what? One thing I would say is I was quite surprised now when I think about boards in GitHub. Projects, GitHub projects. There's actually a lot of there's epics, there's issues, you can start at. There's loads of things in there now. I'd love to show our work board, but I can't do that at the moment because we've got customers. But you can
Let me see if I can show one of mine.
Yeah,
let me keep talking, and I'll see if I can pull mine up. Don't show my screen yet.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were going to bring up the board.
I'm trying to authenticate. Everyone's going to see. Right. Let me see if there's one I can show. I have a few that potentially might work. Let me just look.
Okay, I'll answer Carol's question while you're looking for that. So Carol Codes is asking, how much crossover would you find from a web development role into a cloud DevOps role?
I think, again, it's going to depend. If you're working a lot in the cloud with web development, there's a good amount there, and if you have good working practices, that's a good place to start. I think what's really interesting is when I was in engineering, we were not developers, we were engineers. And Microsoft does that across the board with all their products. GitHub does the same. They're not developers, they're engineers. And we don't differentiate what your technology stack is. So we had to be a vertical engineer. So I had to understand the whole stack. So the UI, the data, and then I had to understand the infrastructure as well. And this is always an argument in DevOps, like, well, our devs don't want to know operations. Well, guess what? Put them on call, they will. So you do absolutely have to kind of.
I do actually have a board I could share as well. I'm just trying to find it.
I'm looking at a couple to see if they're any good. I do have a bunch of projects. I'm just trying to see if they're viable to show.
So we use GitHub projects for organizing who's doing what, for setting up the podcast. So I'll show that in a minute when it loads. Still thinking about it. Yeah,
I think the struggle I have is not everything can be used to be external. I use boards personally, so I used Azure DevOps. Projects. I use Azure DevOps board, and I have my own Kanban board for my work items, and I have my own now about what I'm doing and all that good stuff. I don't know if I can show any of these.
I'll find one. Bear with me. Yeah.
You should have prepared me. I would have had one.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah. Here we go. I can show one. I was trying to find organizations. So let me go to projects. Just loading. Here we go. So it's not a great example, but I'll share my screen real quick. This is where I press the wrong button.
Actually, I can probably show the Enterprise Advocates board. I don't think they'll fire me. We'll find out.
Okay, go for it. Do you want me to add it? Just let me know when you want me to add it.
Yeah, hold on. I'm authenticating in. Bear with me, please.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. I could probably show it right now, actually. Let's,
All right. Send it over.
go for it, yeah. Okay, add to stream. Let me move us out the way.
So we're all friends here. There's nothing customer related I want to show, so I'll give a brief view of this. So we have a couple boards in our repo for enterprise advocates, and these pretty much just show what we're doing, all GitHub events. So we use this to list where we're going in the world. This is our like team's task list, and I will just try to pull it up. So we've got a pretty solid board here. We have assignments, we have what sprints are open, what motions, what stuff's closing, what's been shipped. And we have a few different tabs here with different views. And each of these tasks, and I can go ahead and organize one by myself. Let me pull up mine. So when I worked for, when I did a lot of the Azure DevOps stuff, we had things we could assign to ourselves. I gotta be careful, someone says product stuff in here. Right, I can show this one because there's no project stuff. So, you know, we have each of these becomes a a GitHub project item, and then it can become an issue. So I've actually linked these as an issue. We put labels against them, and then we can add milestones. So we actually don't use milestones. We work in 2-week sprints as advocates. We name all of our sprints off of Star Wars characters, but then we can choose priorities and sizes and all sorts of stuff. We can also make this a multi-sprint option. So I'm working on this task with Dave Burnison. It's a multi-sprint thing. And then we also use templates for ours. So everything we create is in a template.
Yeah,
and there you go. Yeah. So I do have customer data in here. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this. I say customer data and product stuff that I can't show. So I'm going to go ahead and shut that down because that could probably be bad for someone. me more or less. But yeah, I mean, I think projects are awesome. Projects are absolutely awesome.
Yeah, no, they're really good. We're using project boards. We're using issues. We're using epics. We're using the labels. We're not really using milestones either. You can turn an issue into a chat. You can turn it into a discussion. Yeah. You can do. There's quite a lot you can do. You can have different swim lanes. You can prioritize it all. You can add labels that are priorities and stuff like that. So the labels thing's really nice. You can put in how much time there is. So it's pretty similar to Azure DevOps boards. Very similar. And it's getting better all the time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I need to make sure I can't show any of this stuff because it does have
no, it's fine.
and whatnot. So I do apologize. Okay. But yeah, I think it has a lot of features and functionality. I think the thing I miss in like Azure boards, it had burn down rate. Wasn't necessarily a time-based thing. Wow, I'm zoomed in. Okay. It wasn't necessarily a time. StreamYard and I have fist fights like this all the time. So it wasn't necessarily time-based, but we could use different metrics. My engineering teams always use Fibonacci series 1, 3, 5, and 8 for every sprint. But yeah, it is what it is. So yeah, Andrew had his thing as an IT pro, on-prem and hybrid, how to learn better ways of working with and using GitHub. Yes. So one of the things I was tasked with in coming over from Microsoft was teaching the IT pros, IT ops audiences, how to use GitHub. Why? Because I came from an IT ops team in my many, many years ago life. And also my previous team was under Sonia Cuff. So the IT pro audience with Pierre Roman, Vinicius, who does Windows containers, and Amy Coilier, I can never pronounce her surname. And they're all IT pro focused. So that's where my infrastructure as code background kind of comes into play for everything. So I've been aligned to doing it. So there is content coming. It is happening. If someone wants to like lock me in a room, take away all technology except my laptop to let me write it and finish it, that is very doable. Oh, and stand in for me at all my customer meetings, that would be amazing. But it is coming. So yes, Andrew, we're very much aware of it. And I think because we use the word developer a lot at GitHub, and we use it like 100 times a day. We refer to everyone as developers. So yeah, it's coming. It is definitely coming. So I will be having content in that arena, I hope, in the next couple months.
Awesome.
I hope.
Awesome. Okay. Do you want to move on to the slides and demos now? Should we do that?
Yeah, we'll do some slides. I won't make it too slidey heavy for everyone. But I like pictures, so I'm a little biased. So, you know, this deck has just been released as of this week. I got my hands on it yesterday officially. So I redid some of my slides, but I think there's some really good talking points around the AI side of it. So we're going to kind of talk about that. So really, we talk about a day in the life of a developer. Now, again, I just sat there and talked to Andrew about the IT pros. We use the word developer, and every time I have this conversation in public, I say everyone's a developer. And some people agree with it. Other people, get really mad, and there's different emotions that this brings out. But I'm going to say everyone's a developer. If you tell a machine to do something for you, you're absolutely a developer. And you might not be a programmer, you might be writing hundreds and thousands of lines of code, but if you're automating a script, something really simple, you're a developer. So I always say everyone's a developer. And I like this. This kind of gives a chart of like a day in the life of a developer. I would say that the actual time we're building code is very, very low, or maybe we're doing a task. And Andrew, and those of you that work in IT pro audiences, we are always waiting on compute and resources. We're waiting on other people. We're always in meetings. Our actual time of doing something, deploying something, or fixing something is quite small. And I think that actually building time can be quite small. And a lot of times, Gregor, we talked about ceremonies and everything, and we try to be conscious of that. But it happens, right? We have all these things we have to commit to. So yeah, and that's life. So what is the GitHub experience? Single integrated platform, security at every step. And I always say this: security begins at day zero when your developers clone their code to their machine. As soon as they're touching that code, they have access to internal systems. And so many of us work with people that are contractors. And when a contractor is then taking the code on their machine, you have no way of controlling that. So there's going to be AI behind everything we do. And what I'm going to talk a lot about is how this benefits us, because the humans are not going away. And I see Alan is just brought up one of my favorite topics, context switching. And that's exactly where we're going to go. So at the top, we have GitHub as a platform, right? We're leading with AI. We then talk about collaboration, and how we collaborate is going to be 80% of DevOps. It's the culture change and the collaboration, because humans are hard. And every single one of you out there listening right now, we all were born and grew up in different places with different life experiences, had different educational levels, and we all have different technical backgrounds. So when we come together to collaborate, we're going to speak different versions of English. I'm going to speak American English. Sometimes I speak British English. It really depends on the time in the day and how much whiskey I've had. But then how do we collaborate? And this is the communication piece, Gregor, you and I were talking about. So we open up pull requests, we're leveraging projects, we're leveraging issues, and we're doing things like creating discussions. How do we do that? And we can hook GitHub into other places like Teams and Slack, and automate things and keep ourselves communicating across other parts of the business that aren't necessarily using GitHub. And when I talk about GitHub as a platform, yes, we say developers. Everyone at GitHub uses GitHub. HR, marketing, sales, finance. Every single person uses GitHub for their day-to-day job at GitHub. So we have used it across the board. Then we start talking about productivity, right? We all know CI/CD. When I say we all know it, we all know that GitHub's been great with GitHub Actions. We talk about CI/CD. We talk about automation. There is some great new features coming into this space. And we talk about Copilot and Codespaces being productivity tools. And I will show you all that in a minute. Now, everything else we do is going to be underpinned by security from day zero. It's how we build products at Microsoft. It's how we build products at GitHub. We think of the security capabilities from day one, from what the customers absolutely need, and we're not going to release something unless it's there. Now, not every product might be ready for every industry without question, but we do take note of that. A lot of these things are coming down the pipeline. And then how do we scale? I don't work as much with startups. I am working with some of the startup teams. I have spoken at startup user groups recently, but then how do we scale it? So there's 100 million developers using GitHub today across the globe. Yes, that's right, Alan. Security by design, not as an afterthought. So AI. So we talk about, I like this slide, and I'm not going to go too heavy on you all for slides, but I like this one because these are the metrics I keep talking about. Several years ago, we had this phrase at Microsoft called developer velocity, and it still exists today. And yes, it's a bit of a marketing term, but it means enabling your developers to do more. And how do we do that? So if all of you out there watching or have worked on devices where you have no admin access to do anything, or you're locked down, it's prohibitive, it stops you from doing your job, right? So getting people that access and embracing that security from day zero and having more fulfillment from your teams. Now, we again use this word developer, but yes, more developer fulfillment, the ability to do more and to think about what you can do with your job and be more proactive in what you're doing. So I love that, with GitHub Copilot, we have some great stats. We enable faster coding by about 55%. We have over 20,000 enterprise organizations using it. And that is anywhere from small startups to big customers like KPMG UK actually use it. I was on a panel with them at GitHub Galaxy, and they talked about how much they leverage it. And, some stats like 46% of code is written with the help of GitHub Copilot. Again, it's not writing it for you, it is helping you. So I like this slide because it gives those stats, and people talk about these stats all the time. So that's all I'm going to do for slides because I don't want to kill people with death by PowerPoint. So Greg, are you ready to start doing stuff?
Certainly am. Questions will be coming. Don't worry. I'll keep us on the big screen, but we're definitely both here.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So I have a repository here. This repository is publicly facing, so everyone can have a look at it. It's not fully baked out yet for everything I want to do with it, but it's building, and it's been a good demo repository. So when I have a repository that's existing, traditionally in the past, I would clone my code here and I'd open up in VS Code. And that's great, but that takes time. The other thing that happens a lot is when we're doing any kind of either cloud native development or specific development around certain languages, you have to get started. You have to install things, get going. I have another repository that I was working from this week and actually demoing with a colleague today, and it's all cloud native. It's using Azure Functions. It's using Azure Container Apps. And to get started using that was hard. Like, I was on the prep call with her and she's like, no, we can't do that because it's too hard. We need ports opened. I can't do it in VS Code. It's too tough. And I said, well, let's spin it up in a code space. And the code space enabled us to do more natural code, cloud native development out of the box. So what's happening here is when I've opened up this GitHub code space, I'm opening up a secure environment. It is in the cloud. It does sit in Azure. And it's a containerized environment that I can write my code in. It's going to give me a VS Code-like experience in the cloud. Now, why does this matter? I can work on any machine. So I've got a Windows machine that I'm working on right now. I've got a second Windows machine sitting next to me on the other side, and I've got a Mac. I can go between any of these three devices, and it doesn't matter. I can also go to my mother's house or my dad's house or my uncle's house, spin up a code space from a web browser, and be on any machine. I have a secure development environment. It only uses the compute that you require. So a lot of my code spaces, now as this code space is getting set up, I'll show you what these look like. When I go to set up a code space, I can configure it with the dev container. That dev container is what gives a constant experience across devices. We're not going to go into that too far into depth, but if people have questions about that, I do have content around that. We can set up a pre-build. So if you're running a lot of prerequisites in your code, so maybe like the cloud native stuff I was doing recently, we're loading Python, we're loading this, we're loading that. We can set up a pre-build to pre-bake those things into that code space, so it spins up in a matter of seconds versus minutes. And some of those code spaces in the cloud native working world, for me that I've worked on, have taken 5-10 minutes to spin up because it's trying to install so many things where a pre-build takes that out. The other thing you can do is manage your code spaces from here. So if you have existing code spaces, you can manage them. But when you go to create a net new one, you are given options. And I am just going to show this while my other one's building. You can start off a different branch. You can do a default project configuration, or you can start specifying what types of projects you're working on. So when people ask like, oh, I need multiple dev containers, I said, yeah, not a problem. You can configure those. And if you have maybe, let's say a web team working on a certain language and certain product stack, they need certain things pre-configured. They can have a project config for what they're doing. And you can have a project config maybe for your IT ops, IT pro team. But a lot of the time these teams are sharing these things. But if you just have a pretty legacy code base and a pretty large code base, this is a great way to give your different teams that access to the things they need without being prohibitive in those spinning up. And then data residency. So more regions are coming, I promise you. Now, again, this sits in Azure. So this is going to be Europe West. For all of you that know where Europe West sits, that is in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Even though Europe North is in Dublin. I did not create these names, and I think we struggle with geography sometimes when we come up with these regions. But Europe West is the Netherlands. And then machine type. So by default, I set mine to go to 2 cores, 44 gigs of RAM. I can scale that up. I can say, actually, I need 4 cores, 8 gigs of RAM. And what's really cool is as I'm running in a code space, I can run the bare minimum required. But if I start using a lot more compute or running a lot of tests, it will say, hey, you're out of compute. And I can then select another code space. I can go higher compute. So for those of you that work in Azure, you're scaling up, you're scaling down. The other cool thing is I can set my code space to timeout. So let's say, for instance, I'm going to get a cup of coffee. My code space will time out. So this is our code in our code space. It's loaded everything up. And for those of you watching, you can see on the left-hand side here, I have a lot of icons. I have a lot of extensions installed. So one thing I have is GitHub Actions extension. So when Alan brought up the context switching before, even working in Visual Studio Code, I had to get out of Visual Studio Code and go somewhere else. I had to go back into that GitHub repository and look at my actions. I had to go look at all the things I was doing. I had to open up my favorite search engine and search for an answer that I needed. But I'm context switching. And I can tell you, I don't have ADD or ADHD, but as soon as I context switch, I'm struggling to get back to what I was doing. I lose my train of thought. And I think as I've gotten a little bit older in my career, that's become a big, big problem. So there's other good things. So I have all my extensions loaded in here. The other thing I have in here is I have setting syncs on in this lower left-hand side. By the way, if anyone wants white mode, please shout. I can do it. But it is currently in.
I'm too old for white mode, April.
Okay, cool. We'll stick with dark mode. If anyone needs something brighter, we'll figure it out. But I've synced my settings to VS Code. So if I open up VS Code right now, I will have all my extensions there, which is pretty cool. So I have my GitHub Actions here. So I can see all the GitHub Actions that I'm running in this repository. I can see how they've ran, they were successful or not. I can see that. I also can see that I have other workflows. So this is on my current branch. So if I have a lot of branches, I can switch that branch and see that. The other thing I can see is I have a couple other workflows here. I've got a Terraform plan workflow, and I've got a deploy to Azure Container Apps and a code QL workflow. Now I'm going to click on this. There's no promise of what will happen. So we'll see. Okay, good. It works today. So I have managed to break a few things here and there. So I have a code QL workflow running, and code QL is part of our advanced security. This runs every time I push my code. This will spin up a new workflow and check my code for any passwords, any sensitive data, pull it out and flag it. The other things I can see here down in the bottom here. So either of those is GitHub Actions. For those of you that have worked with GitHub Actions and CI/CD, I can see my environments here built into the GitHub Actions extension. So I do have multiple environments set up. And again, last time I clicked on this broke. Let's see what happens. Okay, nothing. Good. And I can see my secrets. So I'm going to say this over and over and over again. Never, ever, ever put passwords or secrets in your code. We have so many great bad stories of people doing this, people being like Uber. I want to find another customer to talk about, but Uber keeps just giving me more and more ammo for this. You can access your secrets from here. I can see my repository secrets within here. Now saying that, it's saying I don't have any defined. I know I do. So this isn't 100% yet, but I can go in here, click on it and add a secret. So I can add the name of my new secret. I'm going to just call it new secret. And then I can add the secret value, and I'm just going to type in a bunch of stuff because I can. Okay, so that extension's not working. We'll file a bug report with GitHub. But yes, all your secrets are there. So when we go to create new secrets, we have that capability in that. So yeah, so that's the GitHub Actions hook in, which is really cool. The other thing I like talking about is live share. If you haven't used live share is awesome. So let's say, for example, I'm working on some code and I need a rubber duck. I need another human to help. I click on the live share and I share my session. Now, when I share it from a GitHub Codespace, the person on the other end can be in Visual Studio, they can be in Visual Studio Code, or they can be in a Codespace. They don't have to be in a GitHub Codespace themselves. So Greg or I could go ahead and
try it.
Yeah, let's break stuff. I'm good with that.
I don't want to break your demo, but we can always try it. I think I've got it installed.
I like sharing with the community. So I've just posted for my DevOps on Azure account the live share code. So if people want to join, yeah, go and flash it up. What's the worst that can happen? This is only a temporary live share session, anyways. Yeah, fine. And Carl, while everyone's joining, or you don't have to join, Carl asked a question. A lot of updates with self-hosted GitHub Actions runners. Are there a lot of updates coming with that? Yes. I am currently, yes, there is. There is something around that, but there's also a lot more about GitHub hosted runners. So when people ask about what runners are, the runners are the compute behind GitHub Actions workflows. They are, you can have cloud hosted, so GitHub hosts them. You don't have to host any infrastructure, but we have a lot of people asking them to have them self-hosted. So same thing you can do with Azure DevOps. You can host in Azure, you can host in your on-prem data center, you could host it in another cloud provider, and you host your own runners. There are updates coming to that, but actually there's some really, really awesome updates coming to cloud hosted runners that will start making the requirement for on-prem runners less important. Hint, 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 hint. I believe it's getting released in, I'm trying to count the days, like 2 weeks. Yeah, potentially. I think in 2 weeks we're doing some announcements. Gregor, have you joined yet?
No, can you do me a favor and put it in the private chat, because I can't copy it. It's been awkward.
Try that. So, Carl, you want to see Codespaces or Copilot in the Codespaces? We will get there shortly.
I think I'm here.
Can you see the code?
Yes, no, just continuing web. Let me see. Continues anonymous. Yeah, just put my guest user in.
There we go.
Not yet. About 2 seconds.
There we go.
Yeah, I can see the code now. Yeah, I can see it.
All right, cool. So we can go into our code here, and I'm going to go into a module, and we're going to use our Azure App Service that we have. Gregor, go ahead and make a change. So in the past, if you've had a problem with your code and you try to get your buddy on the phone, your rubber duck, you've often done either like a Zoom call or a Teams call. If you're trying to share your screen through Teams and then give control over Teams, it is like watching paint dry. So I use LiveShare. Now, saying that, they used to have an audio option for LiveShare that has gone away. So I'll usually get on a Teams or a Zoom call and then start a LiveShare session and chat to my colleague. So Gregor's writing away, and able to code everything. And I can see him by being the little purple person here. He's the guest user. We can go ahead and modify it. We can accept his changes. We can deny it, but he has every access to do stuff. And that's cool. But I'm going to go ahead and delete everything Gregor did because I don't like it. Why not, right? So let's start looking at Copilot. So let's define what Copilot is first. So first and foremost, we have GitHub Copilot, which is the ability to type in your code and it will make a suggestion for you from your code, from your lines of code, which is great. But again, we spoke about this before. It's context switching every single time that makes it really, really tough. So let's write some code. So I have a lot of Terraform in this repository because we're deploying to Azure Container Apps. We're deploying a website, and most of you seem to be in the IT ops kind of side of things. So let's do infrastructure as code. So without looking at our extra code, I've spun up chat. Chat is available here in my code space. I could open up VS Code and have a mirrored experience. I could also open up Visual Studio, full fat Visual Studio, and see it there. So I want to ask GitHub Copilot for a question. Now you have to be pretty specific on what you ask it. So I'm going to say, hello, Copilot, because I always like being nice to Copilot. I think it gets better responses when you do that. How can it assist me today? I have to learn how to type first. What do you think, Gregor?
Yeah, go for it. See what it says. Be interesting to see. How cool is that? For people there's a lot of people probably not seen this before.
Yeah. So We have feedback again, Gregor. It's been one of those days. So let's look what this does. So if we go to the top of what it's given me, it spat out some stuff and said, right, here's a Terraform script. So we've lost Gregor, which is okay. So here's an example Terraform script. I can give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. I'm not going to give it any thumbs at the moment. There's a couple options up here. I can copy this code out. I can also input it at where my cursor is. So my cursor is at the top here anyways. Oops, I don't want to look at that right now. And I just click it over and it will put in my cursor. So even if I'm just asking it for a small snippet of code, so I could say, can you change the tier to basic? Because I don't like that. And if I put my cursor there and hit that, it then just takes that block of code over. So I don't have to take the whole thing of code and do a whole script. I could just modify one single thing. So that's pretty cool. That's done it for me. I had a little spacing issue. I fixed that. And it's also prompted me with another thing. How can I configure my custom domain for my Azure web app? Yeah, let's click it and see what it does. Very often, we're not only deploying an Azure web app, but we're also having to give a custom name for it. So the thing I really like about Copilot is I've asked it a question, same as if I was using my favorite search engine, whether it be Bing, Google, or, you know, whatever's cool these days, Ask Jeeves, old Yahoo days. And I had to context switch. I'd come out of what I was doing and find the answer. I'd have to find the code snippet. And you never knew if it was going to work. And when I've talked to people and they're like, yeah, but the code snippets don't always work from Copilot chat. Yeah, neither does the internet. Neither does your search engine. So we could absolutely add this in and into our code. And you can still put in code comments as well. So you can add your own code comments, but I'm going to ask Copilot to do it for me. So this is what it's done. It's then given us the same code. It has put us on the standard tier again, but that's okay. Because I like code comments, and actually that makes better code. So if I take all this code, take it out, go up to the top of this script, and let's just put it over. There we go. So in our Terraform code, it's created our app service plan. It's given us the standard tier. We probably should have told it to change the tier if we didn't want to do that, but it's put in code comments here. I love comments in my code, and I know that could be a divisive topic, but I love comments because I don't know why I did something this day, much less why I did it yesterday, much less why I did it 6 months ago. So the other thing Copilot can do is can help me find some bugs. Now, this is going to be an interesting one. I'm going to use the propose a fix for bugs the bugs in my code. This is a little bit tougher with Terraform, but it needs to know what context I'm going into. So actually, I do like this example. So I'll say, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what code you're referring to. So I am going to go into away from our Terraform code for a minute and into my source code for my website. I have a simple HTML file here. I'm going to open up Copilot, and I'm actually going to just copy some of my code out in blocks and ask it to fix some of my code. Oh, well, that's nice. So it can't find any bugs in the code that I have. Great. But often if you're working in a specific language, whether that's like C#, Golang, Ruby, etc., even stuff with PowerShell, it can help you with PowerShell and finding that. It has a little bit more limited knowledge on PowerShell because there's less code samples in the world in which it's able to build its database, but it can do that. The other thing we can ask it to do is, can you... Actually, I really like this feature. I'm going to cheat. So I'm going to go and ask it to write some tests. Now, as a developer or an engineer, I had to learn to write tests in my infrastructure as code and kind of in the full code stack I was working on. And tests were really hard for me to write because a lot of times we had testers that did a lot of this for us. But it's really important to generate unit tests for our code. So I'm going to ask Copilot to do that for us. And I can use the /test feature. So it is actually pulling out my HTML right now. But actually, if I go back to my Terraform over here, and let's go back to our app service with our new file. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. can go to Copilot and say, can you please generate a unit test with TerraTest? And I could also use that /test, and it will get me unit test using TerraTest. I did ask for it specifically in TerraTest because I switched the context of it for Copilot, and I didn't want to confuse it. But it then tells me what this code is doing and what it will apply to and what it will do. So I can, again, copy this code, go into my code base here, and under my app service, I'm going to go ahead and put a test in and call it test app service.go, written in Golang, and copy that over. And now I have a test ready to go for my Terraform code. Then all I need to do is execute that, and I can run that against my main.tf file that I wrote for my app service. So so what did we do? We looked at our code. I didn't have any bugs in my code. I need to probably inject some to make a better demo, but we've written net new Terraform, which is awesome. We have then also written some tests for our code and all that awesome.
Very cool. What's people's thoughts on that? I think
all within our browser.
Yeah. So just to be clear, this is GitHub Copilot chat, or is this GitHub Copilot?
So I'm going to have to differentiate this very carefully. So this is GitHub Copilot chat. So GitHub Copilot's the name of the product, and traditionally we knew Copilot as where you'd add in a comment and it would then generate some ideas and you'd tab through it, picking the ideas. Chat is one of the new products coming out of GitHub Copilot. We've actually called the roadmap for Copilot Copilot X with all sorts of different features. So this is the chat feature. There are other features coming. There's going to be a docs feature. We'll be able to generate documentation for within your repository and for Azure and for GitHub. So the docs feature is coming. There's a CLI feature as well for GitHub. So if you're using the GitHub CLI, you can use it for that as well. And then for pull requests, we're going to have GitHub for pull requests. I don't know what the official title is going to be, but if you've ever then written your code, like right now, we would need to push our code up and open up a pull request and run, our actions workflows against our Terraform files. We have to write the pull request. So GitHub Copilot, the new thing, will hopefully do pull requests as well. So yeah, but we've written a net new Terraform file. We've generated tests for it because tests aren't always fun, but they're required. And I would like to say we fixed some code, but I didn't have any broken code to fix.
April, thanks very much for the demos. Hopefully everyone enjoyed that. I think you've showed a lot of things that people probably haven't seen. I think Ahmed's just saying, oh wow, mind blown. Yeah, GitHub Copilot X does look amazing. Really does. Thanks for that. If you ever want to come on and demo anymore, but maybe I should ask, maybe I should prep what I'm going to ask you so I don't throw random stuff at you. But yeah, thanks for the demos. That looks amazing.
I'm always happy to come on and do stuff. That exact demo I just showed you all is going to be a video soon, as in like tomorrow when I edit it down. And actually, because this is recorded, I might just take this and throw it off of my demo to the GitHub social media team. Be like, here you go. I did a thing and it's much better than I recorded today. But no, it's absolutely amazing. And I think we still need the humans. It's saving on context switching. It's saving on time. And it's not perfect, but neither is the search engine, right? I use Codespaces every single day now. I no longer use Visual Studio Code locally. Very rarely, like 2% of the time now. Everything's in a Codespace just because as anyone's ever seen me give a demo live, my laptop usually breaks. It's just like the demo gods rain the breaking things on me. And I can pull out someone else's laptop and do my entire session. So.
Yeah, thanks again. I think we're a little bit over time, but that was good. We covered Bourbon, covered Copilot, scuba diving, all sorts. So yeah, if you ever want to come back on April, just let me know if you've got other stuff. Whiskey. Yeah, so let's chat about the t-shirts real quick.
Yeah.
So you've got a tweet about the t-shirts, so I'm going to try and show that tweet. I can't really show the tweet, but if everyone can kind of look at that tweet, do you want to try and, I don't know if you can share that on your screen.
If you look in the chat, I put the link in, Gregor.
Okay, let me see if I can do that. There we go. I don't know if I can share my screen. Well, just put the link in the chat or what?
Yeah, put it in the chat.
Yeah,
put it up on the banner. Yeah, put it in the chat. Put it up on the banner.
Yeah, let's go there. Let's
Or that too.
banner.
Or that too.
Yeah, I'm making
Oh,
stuff
so
over there.
Alan, he can't send me a lobster. He's in the wrong country.
Send me lobsters in the wrong country.
What was that? Send April a lobster.
The lobsters here don't
Awesome,
have
Mike,
the.
thank you very much for coming on.
Lobsters here don't have the
Snappy bits. Right, cool. Just before we go, just to let everybody know that I've got a stream in 1 hour with David O'Brien, who has built a company from scratch doing argosecurity.io. So if anyone's interested in security in the cloud, not just Azure, but AWS and GCP, I want to ask him all about how he built that. So that's coming up in 1 hour's time. So if you want to come back, then please do. April, you've been a superstar as usual. Thank you very much. I'm just going to play a wee video to say thank you for watching. So hopefully I'll see you all later on. Thanks again.